Yes, Argyria nervosa, if you're an enthusiast of obscure hallucinogens, this is one to reckon with. Possibly, gram for gram, it is the most powerful plant hallucinogen on the planet. And yet, though there are 13 species of Argyria, all containing psychoactive compounds, spread from Kerala in India down through Micronesia, there's no history of human usage in that entire cultural area. So there are mysteries about who knows these things. You know, when you go to the Amazon, most people have a kind of noble savage prejudice, and they think that it has to be the naked people who are off-river, who are very wild and woolly, and then they make the good ayahuasca. Often this is not the case. Often it's the guy who lives on the edge of Iquitos or Pucallpa who tends his garden and is fairly conversant with the modern world. Some of you may know Manuel F. Bruce Lamb's book, Rio Tigre and Beyond. He describes a situation in there where a man who had in his youth been kidnapped by Indians and learned to make very good ayahuasca. Later, he encounters another tribe of Indians. He's on a rosewood collecting expedition to a remote part of the jungle, and he encounters these Indians, and they invite him to take ayahuasca with them. And it's just garbage as far as this guy can tell. So he says, I'll show you how they do it where I come from, and makes it for these people, and literally becomes a culture hero overnight, is hailed as the great reformer of their ritual, and just simply because he showed them how to get really, really smashed on it. And yeah, the DMT is in the desmanthus, and the pergamon contains the MAO inhibiting harmaline.
It's in the seed of the desmanthus?
No, it's in the root bark scrapings. And the harmaline in pergamon harmala is spread throughout the plant and concentrated in the little black seeds. If you don't want to drive out to Elko, find an Iranian market here in LA and tell them that you want to buy Hurmal, Hurmal, and they will sell you the seeds of pergamon harmala. It's used in Iranian households as a fumigant and incense. You just throw some on a charcoal, on a bed of coals, and it makes this wonderful incense-like smoke, which is actually intoxicating. I mean, a wonderful thing to do if you want to do some exploratory chemistry is take half a dose of mushrooms, and then after a couple of hours, smoke some pergamon harmala in a bong or a pipe, and the MAO inhibiting characteristic of the harmaline will immediately lift the curtain for about 15 minutes on a very spectacular series of very cool hallucinations. In other words, they're hallucinations where you can just sit and look thinking, my goodness, this is fascinating and compelling, rather than the other kind of hallucination where you're, you know. We call this mushroom plus pergamon harmala combination vegetable television, because it's approximately that engaging, but very, very non-threatening and reassuring for beginners. That's of mushrooms. After an hour and a half, smoke a quarter of a teaspoon of pergamon harmala seeds.
Can the seeds be eaten instead?
Oh yeah, they're very small and hard and black, and you'll want to get a Braun coffee grinder. A Braun coffee grinder is a great tool for the would-be psychoactivist. It will It will grind, it will flour nutmeg, reduce nutmeg to flour. Nutmeg's fascinating. I used to take it when I was in high school. I used to take it at night, and I would stay up late and study. It would sort of wire me, and then I would sleep. But when I would wake up in the morning, I would be absolutely smashed. And I didn't even know what it really was. It was almost before I smoked cannabis. So I was dealing with these walks to school in the morning where all the colors were bright, a song on my lips, a skip in my step. I could hardly... And you can also reduce morning glory seeds to flour in one of those brawn grinders. So that's a very good kit. Yeah.
The nutmeg, how did you ingest the nutmeg? Did you get it as a powder already?
No, I ground it in a mortar and pestle fairly crudely at that phase. But what you do is you just cap it up. Flour it and cap it up. You know, it contains myristicin, which is psychoactive and which is a precursor for MDMA and is quite a nice thing. I mean, it's not going to shake the foundations of the planet, but it's very good. What?
How many caps?
A couple. Not a lot. Oh, that's what I should say. Do not, you know, people sometimes with plants, they get the attitude that you need to do a lot because it's spread thin. In most cases, that's true, but in the case of nutmeg, it isn't true. It's a cap, a 00 capsule.
This doesn't count for the spice that you can buy from the shilling spice rack of nutmeg?
No, it does. Same.
And 2 caps.
Yeah, well, the reason I preferred grinding the whole nutmeg was because it's obviously fresher if it's ground. And you can buy whole nutmeg at Safeway. Prisoners know this. If you'd done more hard time, you wouldn't be asking these questions. Well, let me say a little bit more about this. The Zoroastrian religion is generally considered to precede the Vedic religion of Soma. Soma is this mysterious Vedic intoxicant of great antiquity. The 9th mandala of the Rig Veda is this enormous hymn of praise to Soma, greater than Indra, it says. Unbroken throughout the history of the Zoroastrian religion is the sacrament of Haoma, Haoma. Haoma and Soma appear to be historically related, and Haoma is Pagamon Harmala. If you're interested in reading about all this, there's a book called Haoma and Harmaline by David Flattery. It's Near East publication number 23, and it's available from the Near East Studies Department of UC Berkeley. Fascinating book. I mean, you learn, for instance, that in the classic phase of the Zoroastrian religion, the only method for gaining knowledge about the invisible world was the use of drugs. Any other method was scorned as completely preposterous. And since this is rather close to my own position, I'm pleased to find it in place early. They talk in that book, they discuss how there is this concept in Zoroastrianism of what is called the Menang world. And the Menang world is only accessible through Haoma. It's only accessible through pharmacological means. That's the dogma. Yeah.
Could you explain a little more about morning glory seeds?
Morning glory seeds, yes. Now this is something that's accessible and that those of you who find yourselves bemoaning the lack of availability could overcome. The heavenly blue morning glory with the heart-shaped leaf, that's important because I see around here, I see blue morning glories with a leaf that looks like a grape leaf. That's not it, folks. That won't do it. It has to have a Valentine-shaped leaf and this brilliant blue or white and blue flower. Those are hybrids. The blue is the wild type. It's called heavenly blue. The white is called pearly gates, and the white and blue is called flying saucer. These guys must have been doing more than...
Something was up.
Now, listen carefully, and I'll avoid a lawsuit, and you'll avoid a tummy ache. The morning glory seeds which are sold in garden stores here are the morning glory that you want, the blue, heavenly blue morning glory. But seed companies have dipped these seeds in a poison specifically to keep you from getting high off these morning glory seeds. So what you have to do then is overcome this by stealth. Always our best weapon. Stealth means buy the morning glories and grow them and produce an uncontaminated crop of your own. Now, the morning glory seeds that you will produce by this means you have to take around 250 for a person of ordinary body weight. So if you are low or high, make the adjustment accordingly. The morning glory seeds can be floured in your brawn grinder and then mixed into applesauce or a milkshake or some thick medium, because actually it's pretty disgusting. Now there's a slight problem here, which is the seed also contains ester coumarone, which is an emetic and makes your stomach cramp. So that will leave after about an hour. So you can either pay your dues and sit there with a terrible tummy ache for this very critical hour, or there are strategies for getting that ester coumarone out of there with solvent washes. I don't want to give the details because too many people blow themselves to kingdom come. High molecular weight solvents like chloroform and petroleum ether tend to be slightly tricky for the non-chemist to work with. But if you are a chemist, go to the literature and you'll figure it out. A solvent which sometimes works, which is non-explosive relatively, is grain alcohol. But grain alcohol, the reason chemists don't use it is because it's not very efficient. You'll get like 60 to 70% of a sample, where if you go to chloroform or PET ether, you can push that up to 96, 97%. If you get the seed, again, treat it like the morning glory. Flour it in a very fine grinder. Those seeds are hard as hell, so you've got to do that. Flour it, soak it in water, shake the water vigorously several times. The larger the volume of water, the more efficient the filtration or the extraction will be. And then pour all the water through a Melita filter, and then collect the water and take it. I don't think it would be a good idea to try to concentrate that by heat, or you'll destroy the active principle. These beta-carbolines, harmine, harmaline, they all have there is a slight stomach thing. They come on in about an hour. There's what's called visual streaming. I am assuming, first of all, I'm making a number of assumptions here, that you are sitting in silent darkness and that you have an empty stomach. And then you get visual streaming, which, if you've never seen this, it's basically, it looks like you're driving through a bunch of after images. There are these purple and chartreuse lights sliding past, and when you stare forward, you can see them sliding past. After about 10 minutes of that, and possibly a hit of cannabis, it becomes more explicit, and you move into the realm of what's called hypnagogia. Hypnagogia are dancing mice, little colored candies, pieces of ribbons, gears, screws, the trivia, the impedimentia of the phantasmagoria of your mind, you know. And then after about 10 minutes of that, And of course, what's happening, if you have a pharmacological vision of this, is thousands of these molecules are arriving at the synaptic site of activity, elbowing aside the local population of endogenous neurotransmitters, getting them out of the way, plugging themselves into the receptor site and beginning to lift the electron spin resonance levels and push them in new directions. And you can almost hear it doing this. And then beyond the hypnagogia, there is the actual trip. And it usually is encountered, you have to go through what Mircea Eliade called the rupture of the mundane plane. This means that the world has to, it like falls apart or explodes or settles down on you. There's a sense of a rupture of plane, and then the visually coherent, emotionally laden, information-laden, high-content hallucinations occur, and many people have taken psychedelic drugs and never gotten past the hypnagogia. They don't know that there's something out there besides dancing mice and spinning geometric wheels and stuff like that. But beyond that, you cross over, and that's the typical model of a trip. Now, what happens with all of these things to greater and lesser degrees, LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, ayahuasca, is, and I've never actually ever heard an explanation for this. For some reason, the experience comes in waves. There's the first wave. That makes sense. That's the drug taking hold. But why then, after 20 minutes of unbelievably outlandish hallucination, will it like all stop? You know, and it's like a moment ago you were screaming for mercy. Now you look around and you say, I'm down. Am I down? I seem to be down. You know, and sometimes you seem to come all the way down. Like on LSD, it's like it totally turns off sometimes. And then about 5 minutes later, it comes again. And you get another wave. And if you've taken a really dedicated hit of ayahuasca, for example, you will get like as many as 5 or 6 of these waves throughout the evening. And the first one is usually the strongest. If you take a effective but not strong dose of ayahuasca, you will get one pass. And often, and then if you take slightly less, you'll get one pass and it will be weak. So if you take ayahuasca, at all times pay attention, because you may be looking at something thinking, well, this is not so interesting. I'm sure it's going to be much better in an hour. And you may actually be looking at as good as it's going to get that evening. And psilocybin also comes in waves like this. LSD very dramatically. DMT not, because DMT is one enormous brief wave. I mean, DMT sort of brings all the issues together. And the way I think of these psychedelics experientially is as a series of concentric circles. Maybe like the outer circle is mescaline, and the next circle in is LSD, and the next circle in is psilocybin, and the next circle in is DMT. It's almost as though the psychedelic experience is whatever drug or whatever substance you take, it leads you deeper and deeper in the same direction. And of course, with DMT, you not only hear the aliens, you see the aliens. You not only see the aliens, you become an alien. It seems to be the most radical of all of these things in terms of the experience. It's also the most natural of all of these things. It also is the safest. It stands the ordinary standards of courage and risk on their head, because here it is, it's the most terrifying, the most spectacular, and the safest. None of us, including myself, have fully come to grips with this paradox. We would rather do less safe, less scary drugs, I think. DMT is pretty impressive in most situations.
So
Yeah.
are you against meditation when you think it doesn't work as well as hallucination?
Well, no, I think they're completely different realms of human activity. I can't, I mean, meditation, you don't hallucinate. You don't, they say you do, but they aren't very convincing. And plus, the monks then rush over and explain that you're doing it wrong. So, you know, what's the deal? I think if by meditation you mean lying down and closing your eyes, or sitting up and closing your eyes a lot, I do that a lot. And I like it, but I would never confuse it with the psychedelic enterprise.
You don't think it gets you to the same revelatory position?
Pardon me?
You don't think it can get you to the same revelatory position?
It's only my opinion, but I really don't. I think that it's that all of these spiritual techniques are not substitutions for the psychedelic experience, but trade-offs. You know, I mean, organized religion is as concerned with controlling social groups as organized politics is. And the visionary or ecstatic experience is unsettling to the religious mentality. You know, even among fundamentalist Christians, if you're not one, they all seem more or less alike. But if you move into that world, you discover that they are very strongly polarized in two directions. Those who are scripturalists and those who are experientialists. The glossolalias, the speaking in tongues, the holy rollers, that sort of thing. And the scripturalists are very uncomfortable around the experientialists, because to them it looks like demonic possession, and they get really agitated about that.
I think that medicine and meditation go very well together. I'll take ayahuasca or psilocybin and sit in the lotus position for many hours, and it's incredible how they work well together. And then after the experience is over, the next time I meditate, I feel like I'm still doing the medicine.
Yeah, well, I think that all of these techniques, like mantra, yantra, tantra, whatever, they work incredibly well in the presence of psychedelics, leading me to suppose that what these are tools that were developed in the Paleolithic world of psychedelic magic, and all we have now are these tools, but we don't have the original engine that drove them. Yes, I am very bored by spiritual practice unless I've taken a psychedelic, and then, you know, mantric chanting is beyond the power of mind to encompass or describe. Sex isn't bad either. And, you know, it seems to be a general functional enhancer is what it is. Yeah.
What about drums?
Acoustical driving is also a tried and true tradition. But see, it's not about the exclusivity of method, but the combination of method. I mean, what you want to do is beat your drum while sitting in Yab Yum, while stoned on X, while at the holy mountain, while the astrological configuration is correct, and then, you know, line it all up and then push it through. That's the way to do it, I think. Yeah.
Would you talk about creativity, like using hallucinogens as a way to get more out of one's creative?
Well, it goes back to this function of boundary dissolution. Creativity, if you analyze what do we mean when we say that, it basically means being able to transcend the ordinary. you see it in a way nobody else ever saw it, whatever it is, and so that's creativity. Psychedelics, by dissolving the boundaries of cultural expectation, let you see things in new ways. I was in a situation recently where it was evening, and silhouetted against the sky were flame cypress trees, but they were all black. And I was looking at them. I've seen flame cypress trees against twilight skies many times. You all have as well. And suddenly it was like there was this shift, and I didn't see it as a flame cypress tree anymore. I saw it as black dust pouring out of a certain point of the sky and cascading like a waterfall. And I was looking at 3 waterfalls of microfine black powder pouring out of points about 60 feet above the ground. Well, I didn't even mention it to the person I was with, but I just noticed this psychedelic perception. The other night, this was really interesting to me. The other night, just as I was falling asleep, a phrase came into my mind that I liked, but I didn't understand it. In fact, I didn't think it meant anything. I just thought it was an interesting phrase. And I thought about it for about a minute, and then it did this same thing that the flame cypress tree did. It went ploink, and this other dimension sprouted out of it, and I understood it, and I thought, this is a very interesting idea, and I've never thought it before. The thought was, if time were space, then history is a cobweb. That was all it was. But I don't take these leaps very often. So I was delighted because I knew a moment would come when I could lay it on a group of people like I've just done. So it's a catalyst for cognitive activity. That's what the mushroom is. Dance, drama, song, painting, body expression, creativity, and simply the passive act of understanding. This is what it does for us, and this is what we love to do. I mean, we are creatures of the mind. You know, they talk about virtual reality as some future technology that's going to change everything. We've been living in a virtual reality for the past 6,000 years. I mean, look at cities like New York and London and Los Angeles. I mean, every nature has disappeared. Everything you see is a human idea downloaded into material existence. It's entirely virtual. It doesn't disappear at the punch of a dial, but it is as virtual as the virtual realities that will eventually be made out of light behind goggles. Culture, the whole thing is that culture and language tend to become traps, and yet they can be the platforms for enormous freedom if you understand what it's all about. And what it's all about is you. You are the center of the mandala. You are not marginalized in any way. And the message that the culture gives us is that we are marginal. It doesn't matter whether if you've got $100 million. Fortune magazine will inform you that so do 10,000 other people on the North American continent. There's nothing special about you. And so we are constantly, this is part of the democratic legacy. We are constantly told, you're not special. Special isn't special. Anybody could do it. What the psychedelic, and so then when you look for guidance, direction, mentorship, we always look toward institutions. Well, I'll go to the university, or I'll go to the army, or I'll do something. Somebody will tell me, will give me a larger purpose. But it's really yourself that is the final arbiter. And if you keep yourself as the final arbiter, you will be less susceptible to infection by cultural illusion. Now, the problem with this is that it makes you feel bad to not be infected by cultural illusion because it's called alienation. You know, but this is, I can't solve all problems. The reason we feel alienated is because the society is infantile, trivial, and stupid. So the cost of sanity in this society is a certain level of alienation. I grapple with this because I'm a parent. And I think anybody who has children, you come to this realization, you know, what'll it be? Alienated, cynical intellectual, or slack-jawed, half-wit consumer of the horse shit being handed down from on high? There is not much choice in there, you see, and we all want our children to be well-adjusted. It's unfortunately there's nothing to be well-adjusted to, so that's a real problem.
It's almost like we've been inoculated here for this culture.
Yeah.
Terence, Eric Fromm said that to be adjusted to a neurotic society is to be neurotic yourself.
Yeah, I think, well, and I really believe that extra-environmentalism, which is a nicer though longer word for alienation, is defensible and shouldn't be thought of as pathological. What I noticed in going to the Amazon and Indonesia and these places is that the person you want to get to is the shaman. But the shaman is different from everybody else. Like when you go into an Amazonian tribe that's way upriver or something, the people behave the way you would expect naive, untraveled people to behave. They want to touch your Gore-Tex and, you know, look at your camera and look through the binoculars and fiddle with the can opener and all this. No shaman would ever stoop to such behavior. A shaman knows that cultures are provisional and is interested in you as a person. The other people don't even see you as a person because you're huge, white, strange smelling, and incomprehensible. The shaman sees you as a person, and it's because he is alienated. The reason shamans can do their magic is because they are outside the belief system. I really think that that's true. Everyone else believes, you know, that the guy in the other village can send the mojo and mess with you. The shaman knows that that's not quite how it works. And so then he, as it were, can go behind the board and fix the cultural TV that everybody else is just watching. So I think alienation, extra-environmentalism, shamanism, whatever you want to call it, is simply individualism in the context of cultures that don't value individualism. And cultures don't. You know, it's said nature acts to preserve the species. Cultures act to preserve the illusions of the population. They're not interested in you if you're an Einstein or a Jackson Pollock, or unless they can fit you in to the pre-established systems of commerce and canons of aesthetic order and so forth and so on. And then that's called being civilized. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
You mentioned something about this craze about licking frogs.
I don't think I did, but if you say I did, I did.
Could you?
Oh, could I? Well, yes, let me explain. The question is, what's with licking frogs? I'm not sure I got it right, but, well, you know, you kiss a lot of frogs before you find a prince, and you probably lick a lot more. Toads, not frogs. Let's give the devil his due here. Toads of certain species produce a relative of DMT in large glands in their necks. Why this is not clear. considering that this exudate, or this material, will kill a dog if a dog picks up a toad like that in his mouth within minutes. It's pretty spectacular. It's reasonable to suppose that then this is just a defense that has been evolved. Some of you may have seen the dinosaur in Jurassic Park that spits poison in your face. We're talking something like that. The toad creates this 5-methoxy-DMT in this gland, and when the glands are squeezed, it comes out on the surface of the toad's skin. It's a near relative of DMT. Speaking from my personal battery of many prejudices, I would say I don't care for it. It complicates my job enormously, because people do this stuff and they think A, that it is DMT, or B, if they're slightly better informed, that it's just like DMT. It is in fact chemically called 5-methoxy-DMT. However, it is nothing like DMT. It's as much like DMT as radio is like television. And that's where the difference lies. The 5-MeO does not trigger the most spectacular effect associated with DMT, which is these three-dimensional crawling hallucinations that come out of the woodwork and reveal the true nature of reality to you. When you take 5-MeO DMT, you have all of the physical presentation of DMT. There's a sense of a kind of light anesthesia through the limbs. There's a sense of falling forward into a void. There's a sense of losing body boundary. Now, at that point in DMT, those symptoms would give way to the trip. At that point in 5-MeO DMT, those symptoms give way to the beginning of the come down. And people who have never taken DMT sometimes rave about 5-MeO and say, this was the most astonishing thing I've ever happened to me. People who are familiar with DMT can yawn their way all the way through it, because you're braced for the DMT thing. I mean, you think, oh my God, it feels just like it. Here it comes. It's going to be upon me. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. +1, +2, +3, +4, +5. It's not coming in. It doesn't come in. And so, and then 5-MeO is fatal in sheep as well as dogs, spectacularly fatal in sheep. And so I guess if you're a sheep, it's counterindicated. Doesn't seem to be harmful in human beings, but with so little data available, I think maybe we should, there are old psychedelicists and bold psychedelicists, but there are no old, bold psychedelicists. There might be a few. Of course, getting them to speak ordinary English is a real choice. Don't point at me. I'm a child, a mere stripling. Okay. Well, anybody else? We can do this till doomsday. I may never get to my agenda. Not to discourage you. Well, yeah?
Contact with the government in the restaurant?
Have I had any contact with the government? Not exact. Well, up until a week ago, the answer to this question was yes. I mean, no. When I got home from Esalen the last time, there was a really funny letter, which I haven't quite figured out how to respond to. Dear Mr. McKenna, I'm an officer of the California State Police, fascinated with DMT, and recently read the interview with you in the San Francisco Chronicle. I wonder if you would be willing to meet with me and have coffee so we can discuss this at your earliest possible convenience. So, What I did was fairly chicken shit, actually. I found a copy of Food of the Gods, and I sent it off, and I said, this is my latest book, or this is a book of mine. It deals in part with DMT. Give it a quick read, and if you're still interested in a get-together, call me. So once you establish that you're an intellectual, they just... harmless, a nut of some sort. Yeah, now I'm a rapper. Now I'm making Leary's mistake, the 25-year-old, the 15 to 25-year-old crowd. But I've got news for you. Next year, Invisible Landscape is coming out. It was the book my brother and I originally wrote. And when that book comes out, all my books will be in the public domain, or, available. Sound Photosynthesis has at least 70 of my tapes. Dolphin Tapes has 40 more. Then there's a scattering of other people with a few. I am not going to do this till hell freezes over. I have a whole other plan for myself. And I think also, once you crusade for 10 years, if you haven't captured Jerusalem, you better go back to farming in Provence. And that's more or less metaphorically what I intend to do. Pardon me? No, I'll tell you some of my plans briefly, because it doesn't relate to this. 220 species of trilobite occur in the shales of southern Bohemia. I plan to go to Prague and organize the peasants of Bohemia to collect these various species of trilobites, ship them into a central warehouse in Prague while we will identify, photograph them, and issue a very high-end catalog for collectors of rare fossils. And I will become the trilobite maven of Prague 6 and disappear from this domain, because I think I've said all I have to say. I mean, not today, thank God, but in the course of doing all this, yeah.
I've heard you mention that you see Prague as becoming a real central point for thinkers and poets and radical ideas to kind of coalesce and be the fulcrum to kind of bring this country into a new flowering, if that's a good way to say it.
Well, I think that the greatest period of American creativity in literature and in other areas too, arguably, was in the 20th century, was the 20s. And that's because an expatriate community conducted a critique of American society from a foreign vantage point, in that case, Paris. And I think that in spite of the Clinton hiatus, that the politics of light have not yet come to settle on the land of Jefferson, and that we should be prepared on a moment's notice, basically, to decamp to Prague and conduct all this from there. Also, Prague was the capital of European civilization before the 30 Years' War, before the rise of modern science. It's an Italianate city, untouched by either world war. It's a beautiful place. I don't like the part of what I do that is a cult of personality. I don't like it that a white guy sits at the front of the room and pontificates. And I don't know if you've figured out this shuffle, but I have, and I know that I don't know anything more than you know, really. And that it's just a funny circumstance of fate that you sit and listen and I speak, because there are no experts. And there is only, the integrity of doing and having done. And really, if you get the message, you will be able to transcend the need for any more of this, because it's really a message of self-trust and self-empowerment. And then what I'm also trying to create is a community of shared associations about these weird states so that we don't have to all privately think we're losing our marbles. Let those who talk to the elves find each other and band together. I am not I am basically a scientist without portfolio, because no academic institution would ever trust me with a portfolio. But I move in the domain of the gurus, the channelers, the pontificators, and those with secret revealed knowledge from Atlantis and Lemuria. But I have contempt for all of that, whether it's true or not, because they got there the wrong way. You have to come through the rules of evidence and reason. Reason is not science. Don't confuse them. I'm very much a critic of science and the scientific method, but I don't think reason can be tossed out with that bathwater. What is being proposed here is that we're on the brink of the discovery of another world, a world as potentially transforming of our world as the discovery of the Western Hemisphere transformed European civilization in the 1500s. But the world that we're about to discover is inside the mind. It's mental real estate. We who have made consciousness our game by building cities, elaborating literatures, tossing up religions, and setting armies marching, we who have made consciousness our game have barely scratched the surface of human consciousness. And it's not like we haven't had a crack at it. I mean, these yogins have been over there digging away for millennia. Egyptian religion, Kabbalism, alchemy, Western traditions of mysticism. And I am a connoisseur of all that, don't get me wrong, but what astonishes me is how embryonic it all is. We are not the tired inheritors of an ancient and sophisticated civilization in its twilight, which is what they're all telling us. We are the know-nothing, fresh scrubbed babes who are the new kids on the block who haven't got a clue as to what the human enterprise could really be about. And we are coming now through a very narrow historical neck where the accumulated stupidity of the last 5,000 years, the dues now have to be paid. It ain't fair. We didn't do it. We didn't bring the slaves from Africa. We didn't invent oligarchy. We didn't do all these things. Nobody's interested in our whining about how we didn't do it. It's in your face. And it's clearly a crisis of two things, of consciousness and of conditioning. These are the two things that the psychedelics attack. We have the technological power, the engineering skills to save our planet, to cure disease, to feed the hungry, to end war. But we lack the intellectual vision, the ability to change our minds. We must decondition ourselves from 10,000 years of bad behavior. And it's not easy. I mean, imagine, I don't know how many of you have ever confronted the fact that you were addicted to something. And some addictions are really serious. If you've ever been addicted to tobacco or heroin, I'm sure you know what I mean. Well, then imagine a global population addicted to a drug, the use of which is killing us, but we can't, there's no doctor saying you should. There's no rehab clinic to go to when you're a species. We are on an absolutely destructive bender that will end with the death of the earth, the impoverishment of its animal and plant population, and the collapse of our civilization into scarcity unless we can somehow restructure our psychology and get hold of ourselves. And psychedelics are the only thing I've ever seen work on an individual level to do that. In the early 60s, they were curing 75% of chronic alcoholism cases that they treated with LSD. They were curing with one dose of LSD, one 500 microgram dose. Well, now obviously, LSD is not a magic bullet for alcoholism. That's a preposterous idea. It's simply that you take LSD, and if you're a chronic alcoholic, you review your life and you notice that you're killing yourself. And then you say, my God, I am killing myself. If I don't stop what I'm doing, I will be dead. That's the strongest motivation to character rehabilitation there is. And that's what we have to carry into the domain of public debate. I can't believe how constipated American institutions are. I mean, here we are under the aegis of a great crusading reformer from Arkansas. A new order in human affairs has dawned, but they suggest closing an air base out at Sacramento, and there are editorials as to whether we can survive the shock of this massive change. Well, I've got news for you. You better do your change-related calisthenics if that was heavy lifting, because what you've got coming at you is something very, very different. We are now in a position to actually make something of ourselves, extend the design process to human destiny, and produce something that will redeem 10,000 years of pogroms and migrations and attempted genocides and pointless wars and stupid religions that make people hate themselves and all the rest of it. If we're going to redeem that legacy, then we have to do something quite spectacular. Now, I want to totally contradict myself. This is not only everybody's prerogative, but it's your obligation. If you don't contradict yourself, your position isn't complex enough. I will talk a little bit about what I've learned from psychedelics. I feel self-conscious doing it, but on the other hand, wouldn't it be stupid for me to talk about what you've learned from psychedelics? That would add presumption to the sins already arrayed here. There are different models about what the psychedelic experience is. Here's a couple. Building on Western psychotherapy as elaborated by Freud and Jung, one view of what psychedelics are is it's the part of your mind that you'd rather not do business with. It's the memories of childhood neglect or abuse. It's repressed kinky fantasies. It's, in other words, the Freudian idea of the unconscious, that somehow these are drugs which dissolve the boundary between conscious and unconscious mind, and then you can do accelerated psychotherapy because resistances have been pharmacologically overcome. That's one model. It's good as far as it goes. It just doesn't go far enough. Then there's another model, which I would call the traditional or shamanic model. And it says the cosmos is a series of levels, and these levels are connected by vertical routes of access, which can be thought of as simply flights through space, or magical trees, or magical ladders. Anyway, there's an image of ascent. And ordinary people exist on only one of these levels. But a shaman is not an ordinary person. A shaman is a superhuman person who has the power of animal allies behind them, and they can go up and down in these elevators that move between levels, and they can therefore recover lost souls, see social hanky-panky, theft and adultery, see the causes behind that, see the causes behind disease, so forth and so on. That would be the traditional one. What I have concluded after 25 years of fiddling with this is that both of those ideas have a certain something to recommend them, but that they don't go far enough, and that we get more to the meat of this if we leave off psychological, the first explanation, or sociological, the second explanation, and actually go for something a little more formal, to wit, a mathematical model of what shamanism is. And what I mean by that is, let's think about what shamans do. They cure disease, and another way of putting that is they have a remarkable facility for choosing patients who will recover. They predict weather, they're very important. They tell where game has gone, the movement of game, and they seem to have an paranormal ability to look into questions, as I mentioned, who's sleeping with who stole the chicken, social transgressions are an open book to them. Well, thinking about this from a mathematician's point of view, an all-encompassing explanation that would explain how all these magical feats are done is simply to suppose that the shaman is somehow able to project his consciousness, his or her consciousness, into a higher dimension. Not metaphorically, as in Sylvester Stallone has many dimensions, not metaphorically, but literally, as in 1 dimension, 2 dimension, 3 dimensions, and 4. Because if you could move into the 4th dimension, the dimension orthogonal to Newtonian space-time, seeing what the weather is going to be next week is as easy as seeing what the weather is now. Seeing where the game went is as easy as seeing where the game are. Knowing who stole the chicken is simply defined by looking to see who stole the chicken. And I have noticed that all of biology, not simply shamanism within the context of human society, but all of biology is, in a sense, a conquest of dimensionality. That as we ascend the phylogeny of organic life, what animals are a strategy for conquering space-time. And complex animals do it better than simpler animals. And we do it better than any complex animal. And we 20th century people do it better than any people in any previous century, because we can bind data in so many ways that they couldn't, electronically, on film, on tape, so forth and so on. So the progress of organic life is deeper and deeper into dimensional conquest. Well, from that point of view, then, the shaman begin to look like the advance guard of a new kind of human being. A human being that is as advanced over where we are as we are advanced over people 1 million years ago, because we have very elaborate strategies for coding the past. It's a dimensional conquest. So that's part of what I've learned about psychedelics, and I could have left it there, but I never do.